So when it comes to flavor in wine, wine gets its flavor from three different sources. The first one, the primary one, is the grape, right? So the wine will taste like the grape. It will have the properties attributed to that grape. So the action of the yeast on the grape or the grape juice, that reaction, that releases different kinds of flavors, all right? No flavors are added, no, like we said, no strawberries, no oranges, no flower petals. It's literally the action of the yeast on the grape that releases those esters that make the grape smell and taste that way. Now, the second source is the hand of the winemaker. So if a winemaker decides, I want to mature this wine in a steel tank, okay, then that means he's going to retain those primary flavors. There's no other influence in it. However, if he or she decides that they want to mature it in an oak barrel, oak is a natural, what's the name of something? Oak is a natural product, and so it has its own attributes. So it'll lend something to the wine, whether it's flavors of vanilla or coconut. That'll be embedded in the wine, of course. And then simply by virtue of the fact that oak is actually porous to air, that means your wine is going to have contact with air, minimal, very little, not enough to destroy it, but enough to give it the oxidative qualities, a slight hint of, then that's also a choice, because you could also store the wine in completely airtight containers so that you don't have any oxidative qualities. So that's the choice of the winemaker. And then the third source of flavor in wine is when it's aged in the bottle. So as it ages in the bottle, it keeps evolving. They say wine is a living thing because it keeps evolving. It keeps changing. It's not like something else that once you put it into the bottle, that's it. Whether you open it now, whether you open it 5 years from now, you're getting the same thing. No. If you drank a bottle of wine now and you drank the same kind of wine 5 years from now, it'll have changed. Okay? It'll have developed other bottle aging characteristics. That could be tobacco, it could be cedar, dried fruit. So those are all things to take into consideration when you're tasting a wine. If you're tasting a young wine, don't expect, all these tobacco and leather notes to come in, because it hasn't been around that long. And again, not all wines are made for aging, because you could store it thinking that it's going to develop that way, but if it doesn't have the longevity, all you do is open a bottle of wine that has lost its primary fruit flavors that have gone, and you have gained none of the tertiary flavors, rather the third kind of flavor from the bottle age. So that's always something to consider. It can get technical, but just know that flavors come from three sources: the grape itself, the hand of the winemaker, and from bottle age. Now let's talk about acid. We all know fruit has acid, right? It's something, when you eat a fruit, you can taste the acidity in it. Now wine gets its acidity, obviously, from the fruit, the grapes that it's made from. And wine comprises primarily of three main acids, but there are many, but there are three main ones. And then there's a fourth one that usually comes through by the hand of the winemaker. So wine has tartaric acid. I don't have tartaric acid to show you, but just know that it has tartaric acid. It also has malic acid, which is also found a lot in this fruit here. Apples also have a lot of malic acid. and it has citric acid, like in this line, right? So those are the three main acids found in wine. Now, there's a fourth acid that can be found in wine, which is lactic acid, like this yogurt right here. Now, before I tell you how you can get this lactic acid in your wine, let's just talk about how acid contributes to the makeup and the balance of wine. Now, if you have something sweet without any acid in it, then it tastes kind of bland. You always, not always, but majority of the time, you do need acid to kind of balance that sweet aspect or that fruity aspect. Even if it's a dry wine, you still need acidity so that the wine doesn't feel dead on your tongue. Now, if it's a sweet wine, then you need even more acidity to counter that sweetness, because it's the difference between taking a teaspoon of sugar, which is just pure sugar, and that just lies there, or sucking on a sweet, KSL or whichever sweets you like. It's the acid, and of course there's the flavor of the sweet, but there's also acid added to it, which makes the flavor in your mouth feel more complete and not just one note. It's not just, there's something bringing some sort of liveliness to it. So that's the role acid plays. Aside from that, and the reason that you might require a high amount of acid in your wine is so that it can have longevity, because that acid is what can help the wine, in conjunction with all the other properties of wine. You still need it to have tannin, you still need it to have fruit flavor, but that acid also helps it stay drinkable and enjoyable longer. If you lose that acid, you could have all the fruit flavor, you could have all the sugar you want, but the wine would still be off. It could be a new wine, but if the acid is too high or too low, then that throws the whole drink into balance, right? Like you want to drink juice, but you don't want the juice to be so acidic that it makes you wince, or all the other qualities of that juice are lost because all you can focus on is the super amount of acid that it has. So it needs to be in balance with the sugar and the alcohol and everything else in the wine. Now, remember this lactic acid here? Sometimes a winemaker, while knowing that wine needs to have acid, they want the acid to be more relaxed, not as sharp, but a little more toned down. So what do? They introduce a bacteria that turns malic acid into lactic acid. I think the bacteria's name is Enococcus oni. Don't quote me on that. I'll try and put the name at the end, but I think it's Enococcus oni. Yes. So it turns malic acid into lactic acid. And that transformation is known as malolactic fermentation. So it's kind of like a secondary fermentation where they take the malic acid, turn it into lactic acid. It's called malolactic fermentation. You might see it abbreviated as MLF or just called malo. And that is what softens that sharp malic acid to the lactic acid. But that's just a stylistic choice. It's not done to all wines, and it's certainly not an obligation to any winemaker to process their wine through malolactic fermentation. All right, so we're done with acid. It would not be the wine that we're talking about if it didn't contain alcohol, okay? So, of course, the wine we're talking about is the wine that contains alcohol, not the non-alcoholic variety. So, alcohol will be contained in the wine, and it can range. You could have a low alcoholic wine that's like 6-7%. There's some sparkling wines that are like 6%. And there are wines like the fortified wines, like a port or a sherry, that could be 17, 18, 19, 20%. So that's a wide range of alcohol percentages, right? And how you can kind of tell that a wine might have a significant amount of alcohol without, of course, tasting it first is, you see when people swirl the glass, we'll get to that in a later video, but when you see them swirl the glass, they do that for two reasons, and that's to aerate the wine. But as they're doing that, if you observe what they call the legs of the wine or the tiers of the wine, which is pretty much how the wine coats the glass and kind of falls in like little rivulets in the glass that they call legs, that's an indicator of how much alcohol it has. So if they're like really thick and they're falling down very slowly along the side of the glass, chances are it's a high alcohol wine. Alcohol is also one of the main contributors to a wine's body, right? Which is what we know is the mouthfeel or the heaviness or the thickness of the wine, right? And just like we saw with the milk experiment, the skim milk fell faster along the side of the glass, and the condensed milk was just dropping slowly. So if you can correlate those two, if you can always remember how slow the condensed milk was dripping down the glass, then you know something with high alcohol would slowly also drip down the glass, and then you know that wine is probably going to be high or fuller in body. Okay? As now, of course, we need the alcohol for the nice tipsy feeling that it gives you when you drink responsibly. But when it comes to the wine itself, one of the other benefits of alcohol in the wine is that wines that are higher in alcohol can tend to age better. Okay, so a lower alcohol wine is usually a wine that's meant to be drunk immediately. So if you have a wine with you that's 7%, 8%, don't be like, oh, hi, I'm going to keep this for 10 years. Just drink it. Okay. But if you have a higher alcohol wine, it's not a guarantee that because your wine is high in alcohol that it's necessarily going to store, but it's a better place to start, okay, than a lower alcohol wine. So let's assume someone gifts you a wine, it's lower in alcohol. You might want to just pop that bottle open. However, if someone gives you a wine and you're thinking, oh, it's something maybe I like to keep and enjoy next year or something like that, you can probably look at the wine. If it's higher in alcohol, maybe you can keep it. If I was a betting person, I'd put my money on the higher alcohol wine to keep better. Okay, so that's that on alcohol for now. I'm sure we're going to encounter it as we talk and discuss about wine, but I'm sure you've understood. And if you can always connect the dots with the milk experiment, then you can always kind of figure it out to see how much alcohol is in the wine that you're drinking. And then, of course, it gives you that burn in your tongue, around your gums, and as it goes down, it's always that, you can feel the alcohol in it. So as you sip your wine, are you feeling the burn less or more? And then even without looking at the label, you can tell how much alcohol is in the glass. And definitely, if you drink a lot of it, you will feel it.